So, can a country be diverse but not multicultural? Can a country be multicultural but not diverse? I'm going to talk about it today. The general idea of this that made me think about it was a comparison between Australia and Brazil. Because there are lots of similarities. For example, they're big countries, they're in the southern hemisphere. They obviously were built on immigration because not that many people lived here before. They were the Aboriginals in Australia, they were the Native Indians, Native Americans, whatever, in Brazil, but it was not that many people. And obviously, the population keeps growing because there is a lot and lots of immigration, primarily from Europe, but then from all over the world. But those countries that are very similar in a way are vastly, vastly different in another way that I'm going to talk about now. So, can you guess what percentage of people living in Australia right now are not actually Australians, or at least were not born in Australia, only naturalized later? It's 30%. 30%. That is like 1 in 3 people you see on the streets. If you're in Melbourne or Sydney, it's probably even a higher ratio than that. But 1 in 3 was not born in Australia. They literally came here for with their parents when they were young, or for job opportunities, or for studying, or anything like that. And that is an insane number. You know what that number is in Brazil? 0.5%. That means that there are 60 times more immigrants in Australia than immigrants in Brazil. And it makes perfect sense. Australia is a more robust economy. It has more pathways. It has a stronger economy and educational system and all that. So I'm not questioning that the fact is that it makes sense. I'm not questioning that it makes sense. It does make sense, but it's still amazing, and it adds up onto something that was quite incredible. Because before, I don't know, 1970s, before the 1980s, most people moving to Australia were European, and especially they were English, Irish, Scottish. They were from a very particular part of the world. So much so that normally Australians who have a really far back heritage look more or less like people from those countries. And it makes perfect sense as well. Whereas Brazil, it was kind of the opposite. Like, they had huge immigration for centuries, from the 1500s all the way into like 1945, 1950, and then it stopped. And so much so that now nobody moves to Brazil anymore. But they used to move to Brazil in the past. And that creates like a very interesting aspect to both countries. So, what I'm going to argue is that Brazil, and there could be other countries like that as well, but especially Brazil, is diverse, but it's not multicultural. Because it's diverse because literally it's got the biggest Japanese population outside of Japan, the biggest Italian population outside of Italy, one of the biggest German populations outside of Germany. I think Brazil is the fourth country with the most German speakers in the world. That is insane. I think it's got the biggest black population outside of Africa, so descended from slaves or from immigrants and that kind of thing. So you see, like, if a country has the biggest Italian and German and black and Japanese with and Portuguese population as well, because a lot of Portuguese people live there. Like, those are so vastly different people. Brazil also has a huge population from the Middle East, especially Lebanon and Syria, that also came to Brazil. And what that adds up to is a country where literally you can look like anything and have been there for generations. What I mean is, like, if you're in Australia and you see someone who's Asian, they're almost definitely either were born abroad or have parents who were born abroad. You know, maybe they're Chinese and they came here, or maybe their parents were Chinese, came here, and now they're Australian like anyone else, but they have a Chinese descent. In Brazil, it's a little bit different. Someone could look Asian, they could look Japanese, and literally it could have been, I don't know, their great great grandpa who had come to Brazil, and they still look Japanese and all that, but they don't speak Japanese. No one in the family speaks Japanese. They have never been to Japan. They don't know anyone who's been to Japan, you know? Whereas, like, in Australia, that is so much less common. And the same thing for everything. Like, all the immigration in Brazil, it happened a lot and then it stopped. If you compare it to America, America is interesting because America had a lot of immigration in the past, and it still has a lot of immigration. Australia had not that much immigration in the past, at least not that much diverse immigration in the past, and now it has a lot of diverse immigration. And Brazil is the opposite of Australia. It had a lot of diverse immigration in the past, and now it has virtually no diverse immigration. And what makes it so that Brazil, being very diverse and being like one of a kind country, really, not being multicultural in the sense of, like, uh, everyone speaks Portuguese. It's very very rare for you to find any group of people in Brazil who wouldn't speak Portuguese. Like, it's by far and away the single most spoken language, compared to like Australia, where lots of people speak Chinese, for example, or America, where lots of people speak Spanish. So it's unicultural in a sense that everyone has already been so well integrated, where no matter where you were from, no matter whether you were from an Italian background who came here in 1890, or from German who came in the 1920s, or Portuguese who has been here in Brazil since the 1500s, since the 1600s, you're 100% Brazilian. Like, you couldn't be more Brazilian. You speak the language, you know the culture, you know the habits. You could be living anywhere. You have been there for generations, for centuries even. And it's a very different aspect to what you find in Australia and even in America, because in Australia, in America, since this immigration was more segregated for longer, people who look different, it's normally because very recently they were different, or that is, they came from somewhere who was different. And in Australia, especially, if people who look different, it's very, very likely that they did come from somewhere else. Whereas in Brazil, you cannot make that inference at all. You could be talking to a Japanese Brazilian who has whose family has lived in Brazil for like 100 years, and that is something I find absolutely fascinating. And they will be just as Brazilian as anyone else, culturally and in the way of thinking and language and everything. Like, so it's interesting how it integrates everyone so quickly, and I think that's something that might happen in Australia in the future, but it hasn't had the time yet for that to happen. America is also very good at integration. I don't think as good as Brazil, but still very good. But yeah, this is the video for you.